Hey movie junkies, welcome back to another episode of Twin Flicks. But as you can tell, this episode is a little bit different. We're not doing any kind of reviews today. Instead, we have another interview that we did last week. And it was a blast talking to David Blanchard, who's a trailer editor. And we talked about it all, about how to spot a good movie from a bad movie just by watching the trailer. And we also talked about his experiences in the business and also how Hollywood has changed so much, so radically different from in the past to today. We even got down and talked about physical media, the battle between physical media and streaming, and where he thinks physical media is headed in the future. Will there be any physical media in the next 5 to 10 years? So here is the interview with David, and we hope you enjoy it. Yeah, and you did. You asked where in Texas.
Oh, you're in Texas. Okay, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
So
kept
it's been
thinking it
like
was Arizona, but yeah, you're in Texas.
it's been like between 108 and 112 all week. So
Oh wow. So I have nothing to complain about. I mean, it's like in the low 90s here. So I'm gonna stop complaining because you got it worse than me.
No, it's fine. I understand. All right, so let's just start. So
Okay.
first thing that I always like to ask with these interviews is, while you were growing up, were you growing up in a family that liked to watch movies all the time? Was your family a movie oriented family?
Not particularly. I probably say I kind of came into that on my own. I think maybe part of it was the fact that my dad was a professional photographer, and I think that I gained interest in the visual arts. So I'm a very visual person, and I think that comes from his eye as a professional photographer. That kind of came over onto me because in the house I was growing up in, he had a dark room directly under my bedroom. I would go down. He'd show me how to develop film and make prints, and I'd actually go with him on some shoots and whatnot. So that may have been part of it, I think. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, the visual style inherited from your dad.
Right.
And,
Yeah, I think that's where it came from. Yeah.
So what was it? A certain movie, TV show, maybe a play that you saw that made you think, this is what I want to do. I want to get into the business of filmmaking.
Well, I think it was. I mean, movies. There were movies that I grew up with, and there were a couple that caused me to be fascinated with movies, filmmaking, how movies were made, sort of the spectacle of film. It might not have been until the early 80s, like when MTV came along, that I got very, what would you call it, very attracted and fascinated by short form. I'd always been interested in trailers and how those work. But I think when MTV came along, the short form of music videos, where you have 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and the fast cutting and getting sort of a message across in a short form. I think that's where I sort of, even though that's different than trailers, but I think that's where I've got that fascination and interest in short form editing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Back in the day when they had music videos, they were just little 3-4 minute movies.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. They don't have music videos anymore, but back then it was 24 hours a day. Exactly.
Yeah. The good old days. I miss.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
MTV should not be called MTV today. Should be reality TV is what it should be called.
Yeah. I don't know why they took the logo and they cut the bottom off where it says music television. I'm like, well, that's original. Yeah. It's not. They should get rid of this. Like, oh, MTV is a style, and it's like, just change the name, will you? It's like it's not MTV anymore.
Really?
So,
yeah. Well, back then, I mean, MTV was great. I mean, and A-list directors. You had Thriller. John Landis directed Thriller.
John Landis. Yeah.
Yeah, and Scorsese directed Bad for Michael Jackson.
Bad. Right. Yep.
And then you got a lot of directors that came from music video, like Michael Bay, Russell Mulcahy, that came from
Right,
that
Russell
world.
McKay, yeah, who did like a lot of Duran Duran videos. That was another thing when it really opened up, and there was a scope to a theatrical tone to a lot of these music videos, like the Duran Duran videos, and even like David Fincher directed music videos. So yeah, absolutely, Michael Bay, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. The music video scene it's pretty cool, and like you said, it kind of made you interested in the editing style, and that's almost the same
Yeah,
as Simon and I when we were younger. We watched, how did they do these fast cuts in movies before we really even knew what editing was, and
right.
it's like I kept thinking, did they do this in camera? They're not just pausing and pausing recording. There's got
Right.
to
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
trick to it. So
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I always say if anybody's out there and watch the early like the '80s music videos, it's really interesting with the editing style and the creativity. So going back
And
to
that informed a lot of films at that time, and after that became the stylings of MTV, the editing in films, with movies like the original Top Gun, and movies in the mid '80s, some movies in the mid '80s, late '80s, early '90s. There's some films, and even Michael Bay has that fast cutting like a music video. But yeah, that style really seeped over heavily into motion pictures.
Yeah, to the point where people started saying it's MTV edited movie.
Right, it's an MTV style of
yeah,
movie. Right.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
That's exactly it.
So what was it? Did you go to film school?
I did
Or,
actually. Initially I went to a school in upstate New York, in Albany, New York, which at the time was called the New School of Radio and Television. Now it's the New School of Media. And I started there. It was the television school where they had Avid. Of course, Avid is a editing software. That's where I discovered it. And they had Avid basic and advanced courses, which I took there. And then I ended up going to a film school in Maine, in Rockport, Maine. There's a school there that's now called the Maine Media Workshops, where I took a film editing course there. So, which I felt was was incredibly helpful, and also allowed me to sort of interact with people in the industry. And I actually, that was very much at the start of my career that I was able to not only learn from, but I mean, just, gain some connections very early on.
oh yeah, for sure. So you actually answered my next question. I was going to ask if you studied editing, if that was your main focus was editing film. So how did you? Now, did you start off? Obviously, you didn't start off editing trailers, but at that time, did you edit like short films, things like that, kind of spruce up your skills?
Interestingly enough, when I went because I went back to school. When I went to school at the New School in upstate New York, which is a great school. Like I said, they're still around. The final project that we had to do, this small, at the time they had small classes of like 8 people. And the final project we had to do was like a news package or commercial or something of that ilk. And I wanted to do a trailer. So I approached students in my class and students, and there was they had a radio department, radio DJing department. And I talked to a couple of students from my class and the radio department about shooting a trailer, writing enough of a story for a movie that we could do a 2-minute trailer for. And I did that. That was my final project. And apparently they showed it to students like for a number of years after that. Like, here's
Oh, wow.
one of the unique projects. So I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. They were showing it to students on a reel of here's some of the big work that students have done. So I was kind of honored by that. But people would ask me what, like in the movie, I wrote just enough of a script for this trailer. And people were like, well, what happens to the guy's wife? Does he find out who kills her? Or does he get back to where he came from? And there was a little bit of a time travel thing. I'm like, I don't know, because I only wrote this much.
Yeah.
I didn't write how it ends. I only wrote what I needed to do in the scenes to entice enough. I did all the graphics and everything.
Wow.
But I mean, that and going to school, actually, I was, my instructor at the new school directed me to a local independent film group which had a number of people. I think it was like 40 or 50 members there, and that was really good to do a lot of networking. And there were a couple of filmmakers there who had just just paid for out of there. They maxed out their credit cards, an independent film out of New York City, and they were looking to market it. And I said, I would love to do a trailer for you guys. So on spec, meaning for no pay, I did a trailer for the film, which is actually still on YouTube. I saw it there like a few weeks back. It's a movie called Advising Michael. And from there was another film. A couple of filmmakers saw what I had done with those guys and said, hey, would you do the same thing for us? And then that was a springboard into my going and working at this independent film studio in Vermont. So yeah, there was cutting that I did along the way as I was going to school.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I've growing up, as I said before, that I always watched the MTV videos, movies that I saw, and I remember me and Simon were 4 years old when we saw E.T., and I still remember it to this day. And that was really that was our spark, and we love what we're seeing up here. And then we just kind of trained ourselves, and I took more towards editing, and I self-taught with editing, where like we would make, when we were teenagers, we would make whole movies, but we don't have what we have today, and with computers and stuff, and so it would have shot on a high-end camera, and so we would edit from connect the camcorder to the VCR to a soundboard. And then we would just pause, and edit it that way. And then,
that's awesome. That's awesome that you did that. It was very self-taught. It was very kind of analog and bare bones and whatnot. And no, I totally get that, because I did that back in the day. I wanted to make some music videos of clips from movies, a whole bunch of different movies, played along to a music track, like a song. Popular song, and I had all these different scenes from movies, and it was 2 VHS players side by side that I learned how to hit the record button at just the right time to do the exact edit that I wanted to do, and that took a lot. So you guys obviously did that, and you had this passion for wanting to edit, and you figured out like this is how we're going to have to do it with what we have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and our parents were always, especially our dad, was always for it. He always trying to encourage us, and as we got into the industry, we touched on it a little bit, but I was curious, what exactly was it that made you interested in cutting trailers rather than, say, a feature film?
Well, I think it was really the interest in short form. I mean, I actually knew that I wanted to cut feature films because when I started, I was living in Maryland at the time, and before I went back to school, and just the bottom kind of dropped out of my life, and I moved back up with my family in upstate New York, which I really didn't want to be there to trying to get on my feet. I just needed to get on my feet, and I had an appointment. I was in an office one day, and there was a Newsweek magazine, among other magazines. And I picked it up, and there was an article in there called "The New Digital Cut," and they had at the time, late '90s, there was a photograph of Ron Howard, not Ron Howard. I'm sorry, it's a photo of Mel Gibson from the movie Ransom. On a computer screen of Avid, and it was showing, this is movies are now being cut on Avid, and there was a photo there of Ron Howard and his 2 editors working on the movie at his Connecticut post-production facility. And I saw that picture and I said, okay, this is what I want to do. That was the catalyst to going back to school. This is what I want to do. I guess I'd already had it in my head that I wanted to do this type of work. And I saw that picture, I said, and I want to be one of those 2 guys in that picture cutting feature films. And after I went to film school in Maine and coming back and going to the indie film group in upstate New York, there was someone from the indie film studio who came down and did a talk about, hey, if you're looking to do an indie film, we've got everything, pre-production, production, post-production. So I gave them my reel, which at the time was on VHS tape, and they hired me, and I ended up cutting 4 feature films for 35 millimeter feature films at this studio in Rutland, Vermont. But I also convinced them after the first one, hey, when I get done with these, also, I'd like to cut the trailers. And they gave me a shot, and they loved what I did. So I was cutting the features and cutting the trailers. So I always felt like I wanted to cut features, which I did, was doing that, but also want to cut trailers. And then when I came out, I mean, I went to New York after that. I was working doing promos for HBO and Showtime. And then I came out here to further my path and further my career in the film industry. And I kind of started focusing more on, I found out a lot about how difficult it can be to get in to edit feature films. I mean, as far as on the studio level, you know, there's a lot of things that you have to do, and you have to work as an assistant or, you know, a second assistant or something like that. And that was fine, but I just found myself getting into doing TV spots and eventually trailers. And I was even doing like DVD behind the scenes content when I first came out here, as it was working my way into doing studio trailers. So, yeah.
One thing that grabbed me towards editing, and I'm sure you know, of course, you as well, is, you know, I've actually had people ask me, why do you love editing so much? Because it's so tedious. It is so, you know, you're sitting there on one frame couple frames trying to get it right on timeline, and they're like, how can you stand doing that? And I say, you know, you have all these different sections of the movie, because majority of movies aren't filmed in sequence. You have all these different frames, all these different things on the timeline, and then you have to arrange them in a certain way that makes sense and makes a story. And
right.
That's what I love about it. Is, I mean, I've heard, you know, Spielberg and others say that in the editing, that's where the movie's made.
That's true. That is very true. I had I can't remember now. I still have this thing that I had printed out and put in a frame, and I don't have it right in front of me. But it was this quote that said that the editor is the final. What was it? Something about the editor is the final storyteller when it comes to a movie. The editor is the one who fashions the story in the movie, and he's sort of the last step of making the movie what it is. Whether or not maybe early on it was before it was being shot or while filming, there were certain concepts of how the movie was going to look and the pacing and all of that. But when you get right down to it, yes, all of those components of production, the director, everything, music, every element, the crew, they're all working really hard to make this great movie. But when you get right down to it, at the end of the day, the editor is the last one, along with the director or producer, to really fashion the story. He's the final portal of the story and how the movie is going to look and feel.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because you may think you're directing this great, epic film, but if you're not editing it right, it could be a disastrous film.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
You know,
yeah.
And so everything, editing is really the stamp of how the movie's going to look, feel, the tone. And you know, there's times where I've edited some short films, and you don't think about this until you start editing, where, you know, this one scene, it just needs something, it's missing something, and you take something from a completely different scene and move it into that scene, and
right, yeah,
it fills it in, and it's just, to me, it's just, I just love it.
Exactly. And when it comes to, you know, trailers, and it's the thing, when you have a movie, maybe you have ultimately one version of a movie, and maybe there might be a director's cut, or, you know, it goes through the process where it is focus groups and whatnot who look at it, maybe some changes are made, but then the movie comes out and that's it, you know. As we're with trailers and short form, you want to, you know, market the movie, there's going to be different versions, there's going to be different views of how this movie looks based on what the trailer or TV spot or social media spot shows, provides, exudes to an audience to get them interested. Maybe the film stays the same, but the trailer is going to make it look one way or another way or a third way, depending on how the studio wants to reach out to different demographics.
I mean, really the whole purpose of a trailer to a film is to get butts and seats, make you interested.
That's exactly it. Get butts and seats.
So,
But what butts are you getting in the seats? What do you want to do? Hey, this could appeal to this age group, or males more than females, or anything like that. Or maybe they're trying to go for multiple demographics of girls could be interested in this, but like young men or people who are interested in this, but also hey, there's this Marvel end to it, but also this romance, and if we market it the right way, we can get the men and the women interested together.
yeah, exactly. I'm sure we've all seen it where they'll even title some of the different trailers like
Right.
romance trailer or action trailer. And
Yeah, exactly.
So editing trailers, people tend not to think too much of how trailers are edited, but it's really a very unique way of editing to convey, like you were just saying, to convey what the movie's about, but at the same time also gearing it towards their demographic. And
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. It's like, who do they want to bring in? Who does this movie speak to? Or maybe it might seem to speak to a certain audience, and they'll just turn up the volume of those elements that much more to get that demographic or that interested group in the door, where maybe it may not fully satisfy their desire through being entertained, but there's enough of a hook there to get them in the door and get the buzz. Yeah.
Now let me ask you this, because I'm sure you've heard it too, and maybe you probably feel the same way. Trailers always show too much. That's a huge complaint people have.
Yes.
And I've seen some of your TikToks.
So true, yeah.
I've seen some of your TikToks where you've talked a little bit about that. So, I mean, obviously the studio gives you notes, right, on how they want the trailer to look. I've told people though that this has always happened, because I remember seeing the Aliens trailer, and it's almost a 4-minute trailer where it basically shows the entire movie in 4 minutes. So it's really nothing new to do that. But why do you think studios want a 3, 4, sometimes even 5-minute trailer instead of keeping it nice and tight and simple?
Well, in some cases, and I have talked about this in a few TikToks I've done, is that sometimes a movie will be, there's a concept for a film, it gets greenlit, gets shot, produced, goes into post-production. Then the movie's finished or near finished or whatever, and the studio looks at it like, wow, this is not what we thought it was going to be. It's not what we expected it was going to be. Or maybe they might be like, wow, this is just not good at all. We thought it was going to be great. And they get a little desperate, and they realize that they have to show that much more. Sometimes perhaps a big reveal, because they're like, we got to show our whole hand here, because this movie did not turn out the way we thought it was going to when we approved it, when we greenlit it. So we got to save our butts, because we spent how many millions, tens of millions of dollars or whatever to make it. And I think probably one of the biggest, if I can give an example, one of the biggest reveals that I always reference, and I've done that like in 2 TikToks, was Terminator Genesis. In the very last trailer, which not a great movie. I was always shocked that James Cameron endorsed it. I'm like, what are you, Jim? What are you thinking? But I've told people,
I said, I don't even think he saw it. He probably just endorsed it and just said, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, good. Like he's buddies with somebody. I don't know. But in the final trailer for that, if you saw the movie, and spoilers for anybody who maybe hasn't seen it yet, so be aware. But one of the very last shots in the last trailer is there's a big fireball. Terminator comes out of the fireball and walks across the road, and you see suddenly it just like blends into John Connor, and what is it? Jason Clarke is the actor. And it becomes John Connor, where John Connor is the Terminator. And I remember sitting in the theater and seeing that trailer, or maybe it was online. And the minute I saw it, I'm like, oh, the studio knows this is crap. That has to be one of the biggest reveals in the movie. And the studio just gave it away. They don't have faith in this. And of course, it didn't do that well at all. So that's kind of why. But the reason with studios, a lot of people, you're talking about a lot of people will sometimes blame trailer editors. Hey, why do you have to give so much away and whatnot? Is we're cutting per what the studio. It's really not. I have to say, in my experience, it's really not the trailer editors' fault unless maybe they come up with something and the studio really likes it. Who knows? But I mean, a lot of times, most of the time, the studio says we want to put this in, we want to show that, and we're sitting there like that kind of gives something big away. But at the end of the day, they're paying the bills. It's their movie. It's how we have to appease them of how they want to promote this thing. So I always stay away from, we don't want to show that. We don't want to show that. We can show this, but we don't want to talk about that. And sometimes there's more specifics. The studio gives us about what they want and don't want. But at the end of the day, the studio's like, just put this in or put that in. And I'm sitting there with the producers like, wow, that's a big thing in the movie. And they want that. Well, we have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's funny because when I posted on my socials that I was interviewing you today, and I had someone under the comment section say, will you tell him not he said, if he's one of those guys that shows everything in the trailer, can you tell him to stop? And I commented back and I said, well, it's not his decision. It's the studio's decision of how they want the trailer to be. He has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, they're the one paying the bills, and
but
so
I'm sure
we have to go with what they want to do, and sometimes we grudgingly put this stuff in, like, all right, and we make it look as cool as possible. I mean, I'll do that, but it's like we really shouldn't put that in, but that's what they want. So it's really the studio that makes those decisions. Yeah,
and you're sitting there like a facepalm, like, oh, I can't believe.
Facepalm! I can't believe we got to show that. Yeah, I can't imagine the editor who was just talking about the Terminator Genesis trailer. I'm sure the producer and the editor were like, "Really? We have to put in the biggest reveal?" And other movies do that, of course, as well. So
yeah. One I was thinking of, the top of my head, was Batman versus Superman. At the ending, when they showed name escapes me, but the villain at the ending, and it shows him, and I remember everybody saying, oh, why are they showing this? Why are they showing this?
Right.
Leave it for surprise.
Leave it for surprise. Yeah.
And then another thing.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. We want to catch up. There's another thing, just more recently, and not to get into controversy, but I mean the whole Ezra Miller thing with the Flash. Obviously, we've all heard about what happened with him and his own personal life, and the studio obviously was scrambling to, well, here's this big giant Flash movie that we have been, invested in heavily, and yes, Keaton's in it as Batman, and there's more to it, and we're bringing Supergirl, a new Supergirl in. But if you notice in the marketing, they really highlight Keaton much more, and they gave away. I felt, I was two-sided. One, I'm like, come on, I don't want him. I don't want to hear him in the trailers or TV spots saying I'm Batman or you want to get nuts. I'm like, dude, I want to see that in the theater. I want to see that on opening day. But then the flip side was, they're doing this because they're trying to take attention away from Ezra Miller's personal life, and the backlash of that to say, look, Keaton, remember Keaton, 89 Batman, you're coming for this, right? We missed the days where, where they didn't give away so much in trailers, and you're sitting there in the theater, and then say you never even knew Michael Keaton was in the movie, and he says, I'm Batman, and that feeling is like, everyone's gonna, and you just don't really get that much anymore when they spoil things in the trailer. But I know you lose the excitement. I'm all about the big reveals. I love seeing stuff on the big screen, and there's so much. I won't hear, but there's a lot I could go off about how marketing. There's so much in trailers and whatnot where they give away so much stuff, or sometimes they put little bits and pieces out there, and the fans go crazy over it, and it just ruins. You want that, the popcorn, your popcorn and drink goes flying in the air, because you're like, oh my god, they
exactly.
Really, wow, look at that, a big surprise, and you're like cheering, in the theater. But you don't want to go in the theater and see, Keaton after you've seen him 50 times saying, I'm Batman in the trailer. You go in the theater and he walks up and says it, and you're like, okay, good,
yeah. You're waiting for it to happen. Yeah, you're waiting for it to happen.
It's coming and there's no reaction.
Yeah. Another thing that people always complain about, and I've had people complain to me about it. I don't even edit trailers. Is showing scenes in a trailer that are never in the movie.
Yes. Now, there's
And
something important about that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, I was going to say, my response, and some of this is true. My response is that they want to get momentum out. They want to get excitement out for this movie that may be even a year away, and they want people to build on that excitement and momentum. And so they edit the trailer before they even start editing the movie to see what they even have. And so editors sometimes are giving scenes that might be in the movie, but then they end up not being in the movie in the final edit.
Right. And the reason being a lot of the times for that, because I was working on TV spots in a trailer for the movie Fury. Remember the World War II Brad Pitt movie, the tank movie. And I was working on that. It was probably like a year out, and the movie was 4 hours long, and we were taking from that to make the marketing that we did. And of course, obviously, a lot of things got pulled out, and scenes went on like much longer, much more talking, and clearly they hadn't cut it down. But sometimes it's, they'll do a movie will be like, okay, here's the film, it's pretty much locked, and then we'll do trailers, TV spots, social media spots for it. And we'll use, and the studio will approve. Hey, we like this shot. We like that shot. Great. You put everything in, that I'll creatively want to put in. The studio will come in and say, great, or move this or whatever like that, and give notes. And then some time will pass, and the studio may say, I think we want to cut that. Or we want to do some reshoots, or I think the direction we're going in this part could be better. So let's re-edit, and some stuff is lost. Well, meanwhile, that first or second trailer is already out there with those shots. And you can't take that back. And people are like, what happened to that shot? And I think famously, one of the movies like that was Rogue One, a Star Wars story, where there was all these shots. I mean, there are shots of Jyn Erso with the Death Star plans in that container running on the beach. And here comes the stormtroopers. You obviously you've seen that. There's and there's shots of her with. Although somebody had mentioned at one point, the TIE fighter when she's walking down the gantry, she's wounded. You see a TIE fighter come up. They just put that in to make it more enticing. I don't know if that's true or not, but there were a lot of shots in the trailer for that, and that's because with that movie in particular, they did a lot of reshoots. They refashioned how the story was going to go in the back end and whatnot. But when that first trailer was cut, when they didn't know they were going to do that, all that stuff went into the trailer, and that's out there in the world. And people are like, what happened to all that? And that's the reason why, is sometimes a movie will get recut, cut down, stuff will get taken out.
Yeah. I mean, I always blamed that it's because the studios, I don't know if they do it so much now, but they were bringing out trailers a year and a half in advance before the movie was even finished.
Right. Yeah.
And that was a mistake. I don't think I see it as much now as I did like when Rogue One was playing, was coming into theaters. I don't know. Do you think studios may have learned a lesson there a little bit?
I don't know if they've learned their lesson. I mean, I think they were just caught with, I think they went into showing that to some focus groups, and in part, I don't know exactly the whole story, but I mean, it seems as though that maybe the audience was not as happy with the way that the cut worked, perhaps, when they showed it to focus groups and decided to refashion it, or maybe on their own they said, we've got to do something different. They sat on the movie for a while and said, I think we can do something different or better than this. Let's jump into it. So I don't know if they really, if you say they learned the lesson. I think they're going to do what they're going to do, regardless. And I think that they're just going to, say, well, we're going to do what we're going to do, and people are going to ask for stuff, and we're just going to have to deal with the fan backlash or whatever. So yeah.
Because I remember so clearly that when Rogue One played in theaters, and after the movie, I was hearing everybody saying, well, what happened to that scene? What happened to that scene? Where is the whole, nothing in the trailers in the movie, and people were mad. And I think that's I think that's one reason why a lot of people kind of gave it poor reviews as well, is because they were expecting
Oh,
these things
okay.
in the trailer to be in the movie, and they
Yeah.
didn't get it.
Yeah. Right.
Because I'm seeing more and more people today saying that they think Rogue One is one of the best newer Star Wars movies.
Oh yeah,
After time's passed.
I absolutely agree with that as far as Star Wars is concerned. I feel like out of everything in the Disney era, that as far as the movies, Rogue One is the best. And then on the streaming side, The Mandalorian and Rogue One, that's the best of the Star Wars. So yeah.
And with Rogue One, they brought in Gilroy to write. I think he rewrote some scenes, and from what I heard from people is that he also ghost directed scenes of the movie. And after that's what I've heard. After the film was shown around and it didn't get very good reception. That But
there is and that had a very interesting marketing campaign, which I am going to do a TikTok about. I don't want to say here like what I'm going to. Hopefully people will watch it, but I mean sometime soon. I want to do a TikTok talking about the very, 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 very first teaser, which really was only shown at Star Wars Celebration, and I think that was in Orlando because I did go to that one, where they basically took one line. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It is online. And it was, I don't think it was ever theatrical. I think it was just meant for Star Wars Celebration, where they took one line in the crawl to Star Wars and they just took that and built on that with a lot of sound effects and whatnot. No scenes from the movie, nothing. You just hear a lot of yelling and gunfire and, blaster fire rather. And that's it. And it's really built in your imagination of what this movie could be based on the one line in the crawl from Star Wars. I just thought that was brilliant because it just, sometimes your imagination does the best work to get you excited about a movie or a property or something.
Well, I'll tell you, I think you did a TED Talk about this. I'm not sure, but I'll tell you, one of the best teasers I've ever seen still today is Alien. So simple. Just an egg. Yeah. That's all they showed was an egg. And then a dialogue voiceover it, and then the end tagline was, "In space, no one can hear you scream."
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
That goes back to what you were saying with Rogue One. That very first teaser is your imagination got rolling. What is this movie about? What's going on?
Right. Yeah. You don't have to see a lot of stuff. It's just your imagination takes off, and you want more. I did do a TikTok about that. Not only about how unique that Alien teaser trailer was, but also the fact, which I saw somebody else talking about that recently on TikTok, the fact that trailer was made with an actual egg that they kind of augmented a little bit, but an actual egg and a pan of brownies. The landscape that you see, the alien landscape, that's a pan of brownies. That is for real, an actual egg and a pan of brownies. Yeah.
That's it's so simple.
It's like mind blown. It's so simple and it's so effective.
Yeah, and you wouldn't think it's like so simple but so genius at the same time. It's like
right. And talk about taking anything that you have around the house and saying, "Oh, this with the right lighting will look really creepy and enticing or whatever." Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, to this day, it's still one of the best trailers out there.
Absolutely good. Yeah.
I wish that they would make more teasers like that. More simpler like that. But
they should. I think that would, I think that would definitely gain a lot of interest. I think we don't have to give away the store. We don't have to show absolutely everything. And I mean, I feel I have notably in my TikToks on occasion. Kind of come down on Marvel because they have so many trailers and TV spots and social media spots where they're showing more and more and more scenes. And even promotionally, sometimes they'll go, on YouTube, there'll be clips of prominent scenes that they're showing. And I'm like, I have to stay away from, and they're like, stay away from the internet, stay away from social media. Who these days can stay away from the internet and social media? Come on. You're going to see this stuff, whether you're trying to stay away from it or not. But simplicity is really, they should try and go back to that. I mean, that was another TikTok I did where I was talking about, here's one of the best teasers, which was for Castaway with Tom Hanks, where you see he's teaching the FedEx guys in Russia, and then he's with Helen Hunt kind of plan what they're going to do in their relationship. And, oh, we get this call, you got to get on the plane, FedEx plane, and do this one last thing, or, this one last delivery or something. And he's like, I'll be right back, which is a famous line from the movie. And then plane goes down, he rushes up on shore, and he's like, hello, anybody there? And then the title comes up. And you don't see anything else that happens in the movie. And I'm like, that is brilliant, because you're just getting enough. That's all you need. Yeah.
You don't need to see everything that he goes through on the island.
Right. Which they did. In later trailers, they showed him his whole ordeal. They showed him getting picked up. They showed him clean shaven again. And they showed him where he's after he's rescued. And his reflection on that. It's like, dude, what are you stopping? We don't need to see all of that.
Yeah. I still remember the voiceover. You've been gone for 4 years. While he's showing them clean shaved and stuff. And then I've had friends say, well, the trailer showed he survived and they rescued him, so why do I need to go see the movie? And unfortunately, that happens.
It does.
Another trailer that I thought was really good is Gone Girl. I thought the very first teaser for that I loved, because it just had a voiceover while it showed clips that kind of faded in and out, different clips from the movie, and it felt like you really didn't know what was going on. You knew something sinister was happening, but you didn't know what was happening. Is Ben Affleck the bad guy? Is she the bad guy? And that was really effective too. And I wanted to ask you about that, because I heard that David Fincher oversaw that teaser to make it that way. Do directors have that much clout to actually say yes or no on a teaser or trailer, or even edit the trailer themselves?
They do have clout, because there was actually two projects, just in brief, two projects that I worked on where the director was specifically involved. I think probably most notably is Christopher Nolan. Nolan is very hands-on with the marketing, with trailers, all of that, and I want to say you can really see that with Oppenheimer, because even though there was another trailer and another trailer came out, you were seeing a lot of the same stuff, maybe a few little additional moments, or they showed more of the cast, but you weren't really, yes, the historical drama, we kind of know what happens, but they were still keeping it pretty tight. And that was because of, as far as imagery and story, and that was because of Christopher Nolan. And I worked on, when Dark Knight came out, and it became huge. Nolan actually went to Warner Brothers and said, hey, when the DVD comes out, I want to go in and I want to add some more promotional stuff. I want to add more behind the scenes stuff of how the movie was made and whatnot. And I actually worked on what at the time they called, what was it, like an interstitial. You used to be able to have it where there was like a little icon at the bottom of the screen. And when that popped up in a certain scene, if you remember that, hit the enter button, and it would go to a little behind the scenes thing. It was like 2 minutes long. And I did one for the Bat Pod, the destruction of the Tumbler and the Bat Pod coming out of that. So I cut that, and then also, there was kind of Steven Spielberg. I was cutting a trailer for Jurassic Park when it was they were doing the 3D release, and I was cutting a trailer, and in-house post-production at Universal, they were cutting a trailer. So it was which is kind of unique. You have a lot of people cutting trailers. A lot of different post houses depending on the size of the movie. So from what I understand, it was me at this trailer house, and it was somebody or a couple of people at Universal, and Spielberg was looking at both trailers and giving notes, but I didn't actually speak with him. He didn't communicate with me directly. But yeah, there are directors who are prominent enough that will be overseeing the marketing, that have that kind of clout. Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah. They want their vision. They're very much like, here's what we want to show, and here's what we absolutely don't want to show, no matter what. And you're not going to do it. And they have the sort of the power, if you will, to tell the studio, no, you're not going to do that. And they won't do it.
Yeah. Jurassic Park was another teaser that was brilliant. Kind of like Alien, we just showed the egg, and
right. Yeah.
just showed the mosquito and the amber, right?
Yeah,
And
the
then
mosquito and amber and the microscope and
yeah, and then show the technician kind of drilling into it, and then
right, yeah.
you had the logo, the title of the movie.
Right, exactly. It's all about like what is when you watch something, you want to say, you want the audience to say, what is going on here? Okay, I have to see this.
Yeah. Do you think that studios are worried about that? Like, if are they worried that if audiences don't know what the movie's about, they're not going to go see it?
Maybe I think that's a possibility. Yeah, I think another reason for I think showing a lot is because we are now in a period of time, unlike 25 or 30 years ago, 35, 40 years ago even, we're in a very sort of short attention span culture. Everybody wants everything in the first 5. I mean, look at TikTok. You have to. That's something I even very early on I talked about that when I first started doing TikTok. It's like you have to grab people's attention in the first 2 to 3 seconds on TikTok, and I think that equates. When you do a video, and I think that equates with trailers and TV spots. Is you have to give. I think studios are looking at it like you got to go in and grab people immediately by giving them something substantial, and you can't be too like you may not see trailers like that teaser for Jurassic Park or Alien. You might not see that approach now because people are going to be like, "What? I don't know what's going on. I'm going to like swipe or whatever."
Yeah, they
to
swipe
the
it
next
past
thing.
it. Yeah,
So I think that's the reasoning is that people get bored very quickly, and studios have to be like, we're gonna triple punch them in the first few seconds or the first 30 seconds, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that's also why they put like a real quick snippet of the trailer and say, Mission Impossible Fallout trailer starts now?
Yes.
And then
yeah. That's exactly why you see those like on YouTube, other places where you'll see like boom, 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 title. The trailer starts now. That is very much designed for people who they have to be interested, they have to be invested in something in the first few seconds, or else they're out. And by doing this little mini trailer, and people complained about that, like
they still do,
just in general, people have, and even on my TikToks, people are like, I hate those things. Why do you guys do those, or why do those exist?
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. It's just like, wait before you go anywhere, take a look at this, and it starts now. And that's why.
Yeah. It's kind of like you have a teaser before the trailer.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's like a social media spot.
Yeah. I was gonna ask if editing trailers, 20, 25 years ago, how much it's changed now because of social media, and you've already touched on that. But yeah, I mean, the attention span on people, especially younger people, is so minute now. Like you said, if you don't grab their attention 2-3 seconds in, they're already scrolling to the next video.
They're already gone. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and the studios, of course, over time have seen that happen, and they're well aware of it, and they're coming up with more and interesting concepts, even with social media spots that are like 5 or 10 seconds long, where sometimes they'll pick one scene or one moment from a scene, but they'll do a whole bunch as opposed to doing. I mean, they'll do trailers, but on social media, if you have something that's 5 or 10 seconds long, they'll take a portion of a scene and exchange in the scene, and then the title comes up. But there's 25 or 30 of those that have different moments from different scenes to give you an overview that you start seeing bits and pieces of because of the short attention span. You're like 5 seconds, you're out. What do you think of that? Well, here comes another one from a different scene, and
Yeah, going back to what I found it interesting with the new Mission Impossible movie, Dead Reckoning. The trailer was really just about Tom Cruise doing that jump. That's
right.
A lot of it was focused on that, which was cool and to begin with. But then you saw it so repetitive that I was sitting in the theater saying, "All right, well, here we go. It's coming." And you don't got that wow factor because you've seen it so many times.
Right, exactly.
Behind the scenes footage.
Yeah, and I thought of that when I started seeing that showing up again and again and again in more of the trailers, social media, and they were doing these behind the scenes thing. I'm like, don't. I mean, I still love it. It's still amazing to see that in the theater, but it's diminished a bit because you've seen it. I mean, I love that movie. I love Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. I've seen it 3 times now, and I'll go see it again. But yeah, it is kind of diminished because you've seen that scene again and again and again and again. And it's so funny. I remember people kind of chuckling in the theater at the moment where
Same.
He's talking to, before that, where he's talking to Simon Pegg, and it's like, hey, would you just stop right now? I'm kind of busy at the moment. Well, how am I going to get off here? I'm not high enough. I'll bang into the cliffs below. And if you watch that scene, the camera like very slowly goes over, and you see that little ramp, that little rock ramp in the background. And I think people like were laughing a little bit because the scene was funny, but also it's like, hey, that stunt's coming. See, there it is in the background. He's going to get it in a minute. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, because you saw the behind the snes how they built the ramp, and you're putting two and two together. Like, well, obviously they built that ramp, and they're just you know what's coming,
and you know what's coming, right? Exactly. Yeah. And I hate to say this, but was there? This is awful because I love that movie so much, and I don't want to question, but part of me is like, I don't know. Was there maybe another way that he could have? It's like I almost don't want to answer that question. It's like, is there another way that he could have gotten on that train? Because it's like that was a big spectacular thing, and it's awesome, and I love it. And you see the train way down there, and the third time I saw it, it's like, this is great. I love what they do with it, but was there another way that maybe he could have? Because that train is way over there. There might have been 5 other options for him as opposed to jumping off there, but
you wouldn't have gotten that cool scene.
But the scene is cool, and I put that questioning aside. I'm not like a naysayer about that kind of thing. But I wanted to say one thing about was one moment which I actually had talked about at one point. One scene in a movie where they played it again and again and again and again. It's the only time I've ever seen it. A clip that was played like crazy in all the marketing. And when I went to see it in the theater, it still wowed me, which was from The Dark Knight, when which they didn't show the context, but in the trailer. But when the Batpod, Joker has the 18-wheeler, and Batman does the Batpod with the cabling underneath, and Joker goes, he missed. And then the truck goes up, ass over whatever, and hits the boom on the street. And that was in every trailer. But in the theater, when that came on, I saw it with a friend. I was like, we both sat there, we're like, holy shit, that was great. Even though we've seen it a trillion times before. That's the one time that I felt like it didn't ruin it.
Exactly. Yeah. And, and it could, the way even Nolan may have structured that trailer, you kind of forgot, especially the context of the movie. When you're watching that movie, you're so engrossed in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
And you forget. And I think that might have been the difference with Dead Reckoning is that, I don't know, I liked Fallout better. I don't think I was as invested in Dead Reckoning as I was in Fallout. And that might have been why I was thinking, okay, well, here it comes. It's not going to be a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and Fallout is great. Fallout has a lot of great moments in that movie, for sure. And there is kind of a meta aspect to the movies because there's always like a big stunt that Cruise does that you hear a lot about, and then you go and see it in the theater, kind of like in where he in Rogue Nation, which is one of my absolute favorite of the Mission Impossible movies, if not my favorite, where he's on the side of hanging onto the side of the plane. And you've seen a lot of them doing that, and then to actually see the scene on the big screen, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so it was cool, especially when you see it in a Dolby Theater or IMAX.
Right, exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
One question, one thing I've always been curious about trailers is, of course, you're using music that's not always in the movie. How do you choose the music? I mean, does the studio provide you with music, and how does that work with like music rights?
There's a couple of different pathways to music ending up in trailers. Sometimes the studio will say, here is our library. We have a library of music that we use, and you could choose anything from that, anything you want, which is all like needle drop music or whatever. Sometimes the studio will say, okay, we've made a licensing deal with U2 or the Stones or another prominent band or whatever, that to play this one song, which is perfect. We've decided it's perfect. It keys into the film, and but you have to not only have to play that in anything and everything you do, social media or trailer or whatever, but we got to hear, we're paying so much money we got to hear Bono sing at least one line, or Mick Jagger, or whoever it might be. We got to hear their voice at least once in the trailer, not just the instrumental version, because you might be playing the instrumental version for most of it, but maybe at the end or in the middle, you got to hear. We're paying, whatever tens of thousands or whatever dollars for the use of this song. You got to hear the singer in it at one point or another. But there's also times, which I've experienced once or twice, where the studio says, go and find something, choose something on your own. If you want, if it's something we like and it doesn't cost too much money, we'll use it. And I actually did that with, it's a TV spot I did for My Week with Marilyn, and Michelle Williams, where she was Marilyn Monroe. And I used this track from this electronica band called, the band is called Ocean Lab. And it's a track that I used from their album that had just come out at the time. And the producer loved it. The studio loved it. It went through I think 5 different versions where they continuously loved the music. It's like, wow, who is that? Yeah, okay, cool. And then we got past version 5, and they said, I think we're going to change. We're going to change the music a little. Okay. And I felt like, oh man, everybody loved that track. And then they chose a Katy Perry track, which on a side note actually changed the whole feel, because the track that I had in there made it kind of very mysterious, ethereal, and whatnot. And then when it got switched up to the Katy Perry track, it became like a tweener spot.
So do you edit to the music they're using?
Oh yeah. We'll pick out if we know there's something we pick out. Like say the studio has a library, you can choose anything from this library. Well, we go in and listen to tracks, or maybe there's a music supervisor who he may go and pull some stuff that the producer's like, here's some tracks we want you to pull, and then I'll choose from those. Or they might say, here, David, here's an entire library, go and pick out some stuff. So I'll go through and find certain things and say, this will be good for this part of the trailer, or this will be good for that part of the trailer, or whatever. And then I'll try things out. Sometimes maybe that track sounded good when you heard it, but then when you start cutting, you're like, no, I think we need to look a little bit more.
Doesn't really fit. Yeah, one of the best uses of music, The Departed, where they had Gimme Shelter playing by the Stones, and it showed Jack Nicholson, and he walks in the frame. And,
right.
One of the best uses of music, I think, in a
trailer. Yeah, absolutely. And you got to know that it cost a ton of money to get the licensing to play that in that trailer, and obviously it probably played in a lot of the marketing for that movie.
Yeah. So do they ever send you like an assembly cut of a film that you watch and then you choose what you want to use?
Yeah, like months in advance, or sometimes even a year or so, we'll get the movie in and basically sit down and watch the film, and maybe make like notes, make some notes in sort of the timeline in the source monitor of the film. And it comes in usually in like 7 or 8 reels. And, we'll make some notes and everything. And then the studio will say, okay, this is what we want to do. And there'll be a copywriter, probably in-house, who will write like 5, 6, 7, 8, scripts, which is basically essentially like, in a world, one man, except there's no voiceovers in trailers now. It's more the cards that come up. So it'll be the exposition. So a copywriter will write, 6, 7, 8, 9 scripts, different variations of that. And the studio will say, okay, we like script number, which scripts meaning it's like 4 or 5 lines that you see on the screen, like a titling. Studio will be like, we like number 2, number 5, number 7. So we'll have 3 different editors. Each one will be given, assigned, whatever, a different script to cut to. So then we use that as a framework and then we choose what we're going to show, how we're going to play it out, what the music is going to be like. Although sometimes the studio will say, for an example, it's like, okay, this movie is a love story. There's 2 young actors in here, but it has a little bit of action in it. We want to play up the action more, make it look a little bit more like it's action, very actiony. And the girl, she's very much a newcomer. She's becoming this it girl. So we want to show her more, even though it's an equal romance between the 2 of them. We want to play her up much more, show her more than the guy. And then Bruce Willis, for example, plays the dad of the son. And he's great in the movie, but has a drinking problem. Let's not show the drinking problem in the trailers at all. It makes him look weak, So it's those type of notes that you'll get, and then you get it into shape with the producer, and then it goes to the studio, and that's when they start. Studio gives their notes, and you have different. You go up version 2, version 3, version 4. Yeah.
So from beginning to end, how long does it usually take you to do a trailer?
It really depends. Sometimes if the studio knows exactly what they want, or they have a pretty good idea. I mean, it could take, like a month or 2 or something like that, puttering away at it. Sometimes the studio will maybe not quite know what they're going to do with the movie, and they want to try stuff. And it could take a couple of months, could take a few months for them to, they stop and they go and do another movie, or they're doing something else, and you're on to a different project. And the studio will come back and say, okay, we want to come back to that trailer now. I think we want to try this. Okay. So that could happen.
Okay. Simon just sent me a text message. He wanted me to ask you, with the strike happening right now, does that affect you with your work as a trailer editor?
Well, I actually just found out last week that it does, because my assumption was that depending on how long the strike went, the strike continued on without a resolution, that, I don't know, maybe we get into the end of, not October, maybe we get to the end of September, and then I would start feeling it a bit. Maybe we'd at least get into September in some way, somewhere in the month. But I just had a gig end, and of course, because I freelance, contract worker, and when you get near the end of a gig, you start calling around to producers you work for or post houses you work for, say, what's going on, anything going on, and they're like, oh, we can line you up for this when you're done with this one. Well, I started doing that last week because I have a gig that just ended, and they said, yeah, we're kind of at a stopping point right now. Yeah, another one said we really slowed down, or yeah, we put the brakes on, and I'm like, oh, and thankfully I do have another project that I'm starting this week, but I was worried there a little bit because it seemed like now is when everything is slowing down. Yeah. So I technically, what I do is being affected by the strike.
That's something that generally you don't think about it. You think about the actors and writers are being affected, but also everybody is. I mean, the entire,
right.
If they're shutting down a production, if they're shutting down movies, the entire production crew
right.
is out
exactly.
Work.
Yeah. And the thing is I'm way down the line of a production. You have like the shooting, the production of a movie, post-production of a movie, all of that stuff. And then all of that is pretty much finished. And then we go into, all right, well, now what are we going to do for trailers and social media and TV spots? So that's why I assumed it's like, hey, I'm way down the line. So if this ends soon, I'll be fine. But there is that more of a ripple effect than expected. So
yeah. I was talking to a writer friend of mine and the other day, and he was saying that nobody likes being on strike, but he was saying that he really believes that they're going to come to a compromise. They're going to have to come to a compromise soon. Because, like he said, that the studios are just bleeding money, and they can't do that forever.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that I really like, which is really kind of exciting, is a couple of people have noted. The funny thing is, it almost seems like this is Mark Ruffalo's idea, which doesn't seem like it could be all because of him, because he said, hey, you know what? We're in the middle of this strike. I think we should all go and do indie films.
Yeah.
We all should go do indie films. And you saw that. Okay. Right after that, a lot of people started saying, and then A24, I love that studio, and I love their trailers because they really don't give anything away in their trailers. I mean, I love A24 trailers. Suddenly the deal was made with SAG and everything that they could come over and do like 37 indies, partly with A24, to actually work and get paid the money that they want with them. And I thought that was super exciting. I feel like you are going to see a renaissance of indie films with a lot of good work. It's not going to be about, for a period, the flash and pop of effects and whatnot.
Yeah, you're not going to be seeing a string of Fast and Furious movies.
Right. Yes.
Which is great because we love indie movies. I mean, like you said, A24. A24 is such a special studio, and every day I'm thinking to myself, please don't sell out. A24, don't
Yeah,
go.
please don't sell out. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah,
You know,
just
don't
stay right
don't
where you are right now, and
exactly.
don't let it go to your head. Exactly. Yeah.
And even Blumhouse, even though I don't really care for a lot of the work recently, but Blumhouse, I mean, they're making these micro budget movies and making a killing off of them.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. And some of them have like, production value is really high, but they're making
yeah,
them for smaller amounts of money, and that's great for studios to be able to do that. It's like, look, here's something that looks phenomenal, and wow, look at the budget, and you can make these great movies if you work the budget the right way, if you plan it out the right way.
yeah. I hope that the major studios start noticing that more. Is you
Yeah,
don't need a $300 million budget to make a good movie. You
right.
know?
Exactly.
And it just
Exactly.
makes
Yeah.
it harder to make your money back.
Yeah. Right. That's exactly true.
Yeah,
Um, and how the budgets have gotten so out of control. I remember, was it 100 million? I think it was James Cameron in '97 and
with
making Titanic,
Titanic. Yeah,
and people were like, he's like, okay, this movie, what was it? Did it go over 100? It went over 100
I
million
think
dollars
it went to like
budget.
120 somewhere around
No,
there.
120.
Yeah,
Right. It was going over $100 million. People were like, oh my God, we need to have do we need to spend this much money? And now it's like, that's kind
that's
of almost nothing. You see these 150, 200, 250, $300 million movies.
yeah. I was telling a friend of mine. I was saying it's kind of like these $100 million movies to a major studio is basically an indie movie now.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Depending on like who's in it or whatever like that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. A couple more questions and then we'll wrap up.
Sure.
You know, touched on this a little bit earlier about what makes a good trailer, but to you, what makes and a bad trailer? But to you, what makes a great trailer and what makes a bad trailer?
Well, I think part of that is what we've talked about here. Is I think a bad. I think sometimes a bad trailer does come down to what are the components, what are they actually showing from a film,
Yeah,
and sometimes a bad trailer can be they've chosen even some of the aspects of it, like maybe the music they've chosen is like, oh, they could have picked something better. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it might be the editing. Sometimes it can be how they're presenting a film when you see that the studio is working too hard to
yeah,
really make it look fantastic, and it's like overproduced. I think those are negatives with trailers. Is you see that they're working too hard to make it
making them
look
too
good,
flashy, or
too
or
too flashy. Yeah,
or even showing like in an action movie, all you see is pure action through the whole trailer.
right. Yeah,
And
top
then
to bottom. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's just like people are coming for that, so we're just going to show that like throughout from moment one through the entire end of the trailer. And also, which is something we talked about, is I think good trailers are the ones where perhaps they only show you, which I feel like trailers should show you the first third of a movie, maybe the first third to half of a
yeah,
film, and don't show any more after that. Those are good trailers. Those are good trailers where they give you just enough to entice you, and maybe they show you, when you see the film, you're like, wow, there's this whole other portion of this movie that that we didn't get in the trailer, and we're loving it and we're enjoying it because they only gave you the setup. I think those are the best trailers,
yeah,
and even Oppenheimer, which I just talked about in the TikTok, is that Oppenheimer, they kind of showed you like there's an hour and a half of the 3-hour movie that you got in the trailers, but there's sort of the ramp up of him getting into physics and this whole back end of the system trying to bring him down and shut him up politically that was totally not in the trailers.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
because, and I think that was, from the studio's point of view, in the summer was the smartest thing because they had to push it to, the 20-somethings and the guys, the male audience, by here's this guy, He's hired in the Manhattan Project as a physicist, and he's going to make the first atomic bomb. And tick, 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 boom. What are the implications? The end.
Yeah.
And that was the marketing for that, which I thought was very smart, and that was good because it didn't give away everything.
Yeah, and then they intercut sections of, I guess, I don't know, POV of the explosion, if you call it that, in between all of that as well.
Right, in between all of that, and it was like this ticking clock aspect to all of the marketing in the trailers, and something which I mean, super minor thing. It's like, it sounds like the train engine. It's like, if you notice in some of the trailers that it's like,
yeah,
it sounds like a train engine of destiny that's coming. And when you see the actual movie, you realize that it's people stamping their feet when he goes into that auditorium to say, well, we dropped the bomb, which is kind of one of the scariest moments. It's kind of almost like a horror film for like 5 minutes in that movie, if you've seen it.
Where he's imagining what happened when they dropped the bomb, and he sees the audience
and there's
kind of
the white flash, and super quick side note, I just saw literally the other day, somebody pointed out that if you remember in the scene, for anybody who's hopefully not to take anything away, might have seen it yet, but there's a scene where Oppenheimer, there's the white flash and everything, and Oppenheimer focuses on this woman who's in the front. It looks like her skin is kind of peeling. That's Christopher Nolan's daughter.
Oh, really?
I did not know that until like 2 days ago. Apparently
funny.
He wanted to use her to kind of feel that moment more, perhaps maybe even just to himself. We wouldn't know. But but that's his daughter. I didn't know that. But
that's funny.
I mean, it's those are the best. To just finish on the answering your question. Yes, is the best ones are where they lead. There's this whole back end or this whole other direction that you're not seeing in the trailer.
Yeah.
Not that they're trying to do a bait and switch where it's like, look, it's a comedy, but then you go and see, oh, it's a comedy in the beginning, but then it's a depressing drama. Hopefully, as long as they're not doing that, but it's like leave the stuff at the theater where you can go, wow, there's this whole section that I had no idea existed in this movie because I only got the setup.
Yeah,
those are the best trailers, and they still do those on occasion.
Yeah, I mean I think that's kind of what A24 does. It kind of just shows you what you need to see, and so
in a jumble really, at times.
Yeah, and so you're not, when you're going to see that movie, you're not really anticipating for something to happen that you saw in a trailer.
Yes, exactly. It's imagery. It's imagery that entices. Like, what is this? Why is he walking? What's going on here? And you're given imagery that makes you want to go see the movie, but you maybe have no idea.
Yeah.
What's going on? Yeah.
So now this is a question that I told our followers, our viewers, that I would ask because, again, when I said that we're interviewing you, this was the number one thing they said, ask him this.
Okay.
And so I don't know if you know anything about this. You probably don't. I don't know. But it's about Suicide Squad. Was it really cut by Trailer House, and why did the studio decide to do that?
That's a good question because I have to say I'm not entirely knowledgeable of that entire situation. From what I've heard, it sounds as though, I don't really know any inside information on that. It does sound as though they took it away from James Gunn and said, we've got to go in a different direction, like he was perhaps having some involvement. But as far as the marketing, they just kind of pushed him aside and said, well, we've got to do this whole other direction. And that's really about as much as I know on what happened with that. Unfortunately, I wish I had more information. Yeah. I wish I had some inside scoop on it. But I really only know what everyone else has read out there. But that could be because sometimes, for what it's worth, I will say sometimes the studio, they might, maybe there is a direction that's intended, or maybe the director's like, hey, we really should go in this direction with pushing it. Here's the best parts of it or whatever. And the studio will even perhaps lose faith or realize, okay, we think we know better than this director or the filmmakers. We're just going to take it and we're going to do our thing. And sometimes they can totally mess that up because they don't have their finger on the pulse of moviegoers, maybe like the director does. Yeah. So that's kind of sort of an answer, but yeah.
Yeah. My response was, I'll go and ask him, but just because he works in this business doesn't mean he knows everything. It's kind of like, well,
Right.
you live in Oregon, so do you know Ryan? It's kind of like,
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, there's some things that I have experienced in the industry. Sometimes it might have been, a little controversial, or things that people never knew happened. But so I have experienced some of that, but this is one of them that I don't have direct knowledge. But yeah, that's true. It's like, do you know so and so in Oregon? It's
yeah.
like, no,
But
right.
but you live in the same area. You should know him.
Right, you live in the same area. Yeah, you live in the same state. You should know everybody there. Why didn't you do that? Yeah.
I'm going to ask one last question that has absolutely nothing to do with trailers.
Okay.
And that is physical media. I'm sure you're a collector of physical media yourself.
I have some physical media. I mean, I'm kind of split. I mean, everything I've been doing, and I want to get to your question, obviously, but yeah, I mean, when the iTunes, when digital HD got good enough, got to Blu-ray quality imagery, that's when I said, all right, now I'm ready to do digital. So most of the stuff I have is digital HD. If there's a movie that streaming, if there's a movie that I really like, I will buy it. But there's a rarity of when I will actually buy a digital HD copy, and it gives you any indication of how rare it is. The last movie I bought was Top Gun Maverick, and before that was Free Guy. And those are, again, movies that are like a year apart. That's how much I love those movies, but it takes a lot. But the flip side is I do have physical media. Sometimes there are movies that they're not on streaming, they're not on digital download. They're only on Blu-ray, like Better Off Dead, the John Cusack 80s movie. That's a Blu-ray release. I mean, I have Blu-rays that are like, it's on, you can't, no streaming. Well, I don't think that's streaming. I shouldn't say it's not gospel, but it's not, you can't really buy it on digital, but it's on Blu-ray. And I'm like, all right. So whenever I see something, it's like this just came out on Blu-ray or whatever it might be. Well, then I'm going to go and I'm gonna get it. There's a Richard Dreyfuss movie from 1978 called The Big Fix, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And for the longest time, it was on VHS. Forever, it was on VHS. And of course, I'd moved out of that. And then finally, I think it was in 2016, they put it out on DVD, and I'm like, shut up and take my money, even though it was DVD. And then finally, there was a Blu-ray. Someone managed to get a Blu-ray. I can't say how, but someone managed to get an HD copy for me, which I have in physical media. And I was so happy. But it's like, yeah, I do enjoy physical media. Yeah.
I was just curious. We're kind of seeing a shift here where major studios are kind of leaning away towards physical media and putting a focus on streaming.
Right. Yeah.
And there's always that question: is how much Disney's is already doing it in Australia. They said they're cutting off all physical media in Australia.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I was just curious, what's your idea? What about how long do you think it'll be till it happens here, where major studios like Warner Bros., Universal are saying, okay, we're not doing digital anymore; it's all streaming. I mean, we're not doing physical anymore; it's going to be all streaming.
Right. I think that could be seriously on the way. Because think of the cost, which is something I thought about when HD movies, like I was just saying, digital HD movies like iTunes, or now certainly there's other places you can get it, like Amazon, where you download the movie. That is like, well, of course, maybe I'm being naive about it. It's like, hey, imagine where they're not having to press thousands and thousands and thousands of Blu-rays and package them. The cost of all of that, the time consumption, the slipcover printed out, and all of that stuff to get out to stores and whatnot. Look, they have a file or multiple files of the movie, and people download from that. And look at how much money was saved by them. I mean, I don't know how much. I never did the research, but it's like you get a ton of movie, a ton of money had been saved by them not, for some of these movies, perhaps not doing a physical. But I think it seems like we will potentially. I mean, there is a market for physical media, kind of like vinyl. I mean, if vinyl sort of went the way of the dodo, if you will, to quote Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. But now, particularly over the last 10 or 15 years, people are embracing, for obvious reasons, vinyl has come back in a big way. So I think I think there is a market there for Blu-ray and for physical media, but I think they want to inch more towards making it streaming. And of course, I think you might have heard that Disney is not going to, Marvel is not going to release physical media of WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki. There's not going to be physical media of that. It's just streaming, and that's it. And people are balking. It's like, wait, hang on a second. I want my physical media.
Yeah.
So
When I have a discussion, I always say, I'm pro physical media because I just think it's better quality. But I don't have an issue with streaming either, because I watch a lot of streaming as well. But I always tell people, from a physical media, someone who's pro physical media, of course, I want physical media to stay here. But if you're taking it from a studio financial viewpoint, it makes total sense, because if like Warner Brothers, if they put all their stuff on HBO or what's now Max, that's basically 100% profit for them. They don't have to share with any other middlemen or third parties.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you want to just do everything on streaming? And I would hate to see that happen. Yeah.
Where it's just all streaming. I want to own these movies, even ones that I have, which is kind of, sort of the majority that I have in a file, as opposed to physical. But I want to actually have the movies, and I don't like the idea that they can be taken away. If you do all streaming, they can be taken away, which, on a side note, that's the thing that I had to learn the hard way on Netflix, is there was a couple of movies that early on was streaming. Early on, we were just getting out of the DVD rental thing. Early on, I got on Netflix and was paying much more attention to streaming. And there were like 2 movies on there that I loved that were on there in HD, and they'd never been HD before ever in the history. And there they were on Netflix, and I'm like, oh my God, there they are. And I was very naive at the time, thinking all movies are going to go to Netflix and they're just going to stay there. No, there's these licensing deals. Here's all the movies that are leaving next month, and here's all the movies that are coming out. I'm like, what the hell is that about? Just everything should just be there all the time. So I don't like they can take it away.
And even if you buy a movie on, Apple TV or whatever, you're not really buying it. It's not yours to keep. It's basically leased. You're basically leasing it until their licensing runs out, and they can just take it away from you.
I keep hearing that about this whole taking it away stuff, and that's kind of scary. That makes me want to. I mean, I have all my movies backed up.
Yeah.
But how far into your computer can they reach to delete your file? I'm like, wait, dude, no. What's going on here?
Yeah, I've had that. I had that happen to me, where I bought a couple movies on Vudu, and then I went to go look for them, and they were gone. And I emailed Vudu, and they're saying, our licensing rights for that title expired, and we chose not to renegotiate so I paid $14, and I don't even have the movie now. So,
which is maddening and frustrating. It's like, you bought that movie. Movie, regardless of whatever the hell they're doing after that, you bought that movie. That movie is a file on your computer. Nobody should come and take it away. Right. That's BS. Yeah. I mean, I haven't had that happen. I would probably get up and scream if I saw that happen. I haven't seen it happen yet, but I'm just like, where is my movie? Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, these boutique labels like Kino Lorber, Shout Factory, Criterion, I'm seeing more and more catalog releases from like Paramount, Warner Brothers being licensed out to these boutique companies now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I've always said that to me shows a sign that, that these studios are moving away from physical media. Just the fact they're licensing these big movies now to, like Serpico from Paramount was just released by Kino Lorber on 4K.
Oh, yeah,
I'm thinking to myself, why didn't Paramount put that out?
Right.
That's kind of like a huge movie for
you
Paramount.
would think. Yeah, exactly.
But, so, all the signs.
I do. I mean, I do love. I mean, on the flip side, I do like when Shout Factory does something, they baby that movie or whatever it is. They baby that thing and they love it, and they're passionate about bringing everything, all of the best aspects of that movie with all these special features and all the kind of stuff that they put on. I mean, I love Shout Factory. It's one of the ones that I like. Right.
Yeah,
but I get what you're saying. You know.
Yeah, we don't see these major studios really putting forth any effort for special features anymore because they don't want to put forth the cost to make them.
It's the cost to make them. Yeah. And there's even some movies out there. Obviously, there's movies that have not hit physical media or anything. And there's some movies out there that they're a little bit older, and at the time they were big, giant hits for the studio. It was a big hit from this year or that year or whatever. And it's just a movie with no special features or interviews or anything. And it's like that movie was. I mean, we're not talking something like Star Wars or whatever or something like that. But I mean, it was a movie that was prominent in a particular year. There's a few of them where it's like, here's just the movie. It's like, and there's no trailer and there's no commentary and there's no. Come on, this was made a lot of money for you guys.
Right, and this just happened. Excuse me. This just happened recently with Warner Brothers. They put out a 4K of Enter the Dragon. And it's just bare bones. And
what the hell? Yeah.
People are online screaming, saying, it's the 50th anniversary. This is a huge movie.
Right.
Why are you not adding any new special features?
Yeah.
And, but then if you know, like you said, if Shout Factory got a hold of Enter the Dragon, they'd be having a 3-disc set full of special features.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And talking to Bruce Lee's family members and just getting whatever insight that they possibly could, and that's gone to the limited run theatrically now. I think Fathom Events was doing that. Yeah,
in the next week or two. Yeah,
right. Yeah, which is very cool. I love that they do. I love these anniversary releases.
Yeah, I went. Me and Simon went to go see The Thing. They had a anniversary thing for it, and it was awesome seeing it in the theater. It was great.
Yeah. I did the same thing with The Godfather when it was the 50th, which was last year. Went to see that in a really good sized auditorium, good sized theater, and it was practically sold out. And I had seen it. I mean, I love that movie. I'd seen it so many times, but not in the theater. And to actually see it on the big giant screen was just a very different, refreshed aspect take on it.
Yeah, even though you've seen a movie a dozen times, it's like a new experience almost seeing it in the theater, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks so much for coming on. It was a joy talking to you. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And it was great talking to you as well, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat. I love chatting about trailers and movies always.
Yeah, maybe we'll have you on again sometime and invite you back on.
Great. I love it. Absolutely. I would look forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. So I sometimes do some live shows on YouTube with viewers to ask questions in the chat and stuff. So maybe if you're free sometime, I'll invite you on and we'll.
That'd be awesome. I would love that. Yeah, please. Cool. I'd love to do that. Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, you have a good evening, and we'll see you. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.